Hunters. Monster Hunter Rise is about to include two different augmentation systems. One for armor and another for weapons. We have very little details of how these works. In fact, we only have some screenshots and that is all. So how it is going to actually work is all pure speculation and nothing else. At most we can try to guess how it could work by rather than trying to look at the future, to look at the past. This video is about the 4 different augmentation systems that Monster Hunter World and Iceborne introduced into the game so we can get some insight into how these have worked in the past. The first augmentation system was introduced in the base game and was, to put it in simple terms, broken. It was a fixed slotted system where you could pick to improve raw attack, element attack, defense that also included a divine blessing-like effect and a self-healing augmentation. Max rarity 8 weapons got 3 slots and then rarity 7 got 2 and rarity 6 3. The system had 2 big major problems. First, it was that by how Monster Hunter balance usually works, low rarity weapons are usually not worth it. You could count with one hand the total number of rarity 7 and 6 that there was worth using, and half of these were gunlances and the other was the glutton. I guess the extra augmentations were meant to be a way to catch up the rarity and make more weapons viable at the endgame, but failed hard to it because the bonuses were too small to make a real difference except for one. The second problem was how powerful was the very best augmentation of all, healing augmentation. It was so good that you could basically ignore potions and heal using it in seconds by attacking, and was the perfect companion for the other 2 most broken things of base Monster Hunter World, Rocksteady and Vitality Mantle. With the combination of Rocksteady and healing augmentation, you could basically ignore most monsters' attacks and heal any damage you got while keeping the attack. These 3 things were so broken that the monsters released as DLC all had ways to ignore or counter these mantles, or dealt insane amounts of multi-hit damage to overwhelm the Rocksteady users. So basically, the classic augmentation system was about placing healing augmentation in every weapon. This could be considered a total fail and was reworked for Iceborne. Iceborne tossed to the trash the old augmentation system and gave us not 1 but 2 augmentation systems at launch, one of them practically forgotten. The rebuilt augmentation system kept the same bonuses that before, but now instead of having to play with a single slot, you had a point system and every kind of augmentation had a tied value. By example, the prime choices of raw attack and healing augmentation had a cost of 3, affinity and elemental attack 2 and defense 1. Further upgrades also had variable costs, so you could get the second healing augmentation with 5 points. The max number of points once again was dependent on the rarity of the weapon, and once again very few low rarity weapons were worth using at all. By example, the only rarity 7 gunlance worth using was Vols, because at the end could get 3 healing augmentations unlike the usual best gunlance of Safi. This brings to another big difference, that was that the number of available points for upgrades raised with the different updates, and this served as an incentive to play the new content and get some power creep. I was not a fan of this because it made the higher rarity weapons much better. But in general, this was a much more balanced and fun to play with this system. Instead of just going for healing augmentation and call it a day, you could now do interesting combinations like 1 healing, 1 affinity upgrade and 1 of extra defense. The only thing I disliked about it is that the only upgrades that did something for shelling type gunlance were healing, defense and extra slot, and this last one was very overpriced for the effect, since a level 1 slot is no way worth what you can get otherwise, like heal on it. The other system was so weird, weak and flawed that almost everyone has forgotten about it. Customization was first limited to a few weapons. The ugliest ones to be exact. It was like a kind of layered weapon system that allowed you to change the appearance of the ugly bone weapons by changing the cover zone to another monster. And on top of it, you could get a bonus depending on the part you got. The biggest issue is that the bonuses were ridiculously weak. We are talking about 1 point of raw status or affinity, or 10 points of defense per upgrade. There was just one interesting upgrade that improved the sharpness of weapons, but that was not available at launch. Didn't help at all that all new weapons in the updates had unique designs, and because none used the customization system, this was totally forgotten by everyone. And finally, we got the most memorable augmentation system in Safi Jiva, Awakening Weapons. The Awakening system seems to be the primary inspiration for the Rampage system of base Rise. That also has been thrown under the bus for the moment. In fact, this is exactly the same concept: build your own weapon. It had an annoying RNG system that made it hard to get some combinations, but with some smart save scumming could be dodged. You could decide how much raw, status or elemental damage it had, plus giving it a good slot and a slot bonus skill. Also, unlike the augmentation systems, it had options specific for every weapon. For example, for gunlance you could pick the shell type and upgrade it to endgame levels. This system did miracles like making elemental gunlance the strongest for that time period before Wide 7 or the introduction of the Wormstake spam. The Rampage could have been this good, but they decided to ruin it by making every option that was not raw bring a hefty nerf to your raw damage and killing any chance to use it properly unless the typical element-based weapons. They also penalized gunlance by having to pick the shell type and only have 2 other options left, while bowguns got extra options, so there was no excuse for it. Ahem. Back to track. These were all the augmentation systems of Monster Hunter World and Iceborne. Now looking at the screenshots we have about the new Qurious crafting system, we see something side by side exactly like the Iceborne augmentation system was. Gone are the defense and healing augmentation, and we got for new being able to increase sharpness like Custom and Awakening had. Just like in Iceborne, there is a point system called Augmentation Slots. By the shape of the icons I would think each one costs 1 point. But this list seems to be open-ended instead of a list of fixed options. There is also the fact that sharpness is included here. Sharpness does nothing to ranged weapons, and this makes me think that some weapons will have unique slots. Or that new slots will be available in the future, because it would make no sense to have 5 options for 5 slots. They also have copied that you have to spend stuff to unlock the final points, and I bet my bet they will improve the slots with each update. I would be not surprised if healing augmentation becomes an option in the future. But considering how all these options are offensive and we have now armor augmentation, makes sense to not have defensive options here. Do you think the same? What is radically different and unique is the armor upgrade system. The most similar thing I can think of is the relic armor system of Monster Hunter 4, and still this is not the same. By the looks of it, it seems to be a random roll thing where your armor can gain and lose different stats. The most important things you can win here are more slots and skills. But we ignore how you roll and which skills can roll here. We got several examples of the same weapon with different outcomes. The reason why we think this is a random generation is because by the capture we see we have the option to confirm either the current status of the armor or the new one. If this works like Safi Jiva, then it will mean that every armor piece will have a different seed, and you will be unable to save scum to have a particular armor give you different outcomes. But this also would mean you get a new seed by crafting the armor again. Keep this in mind before going crazy when the update releases, and don't burn all your materials. In fact, since this rolling could be powered up by regular monsters' materials, I would think twice about melding your materials before the update comes out, since you might need them. Of course, if your current talisman sucks, keep rolling. And that is my analysis of the future and past augmentation systems. It is funny how they can spin this concept of powering up weapons over and over without repeating the system. Which augmentation system was your favorite? How do you think the new system is going to be? Let me know in the comments. And see you in the hunt.